Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have some more terrifying but very intriguing encounters to share with you. Before we get into the upload, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch store to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3. The audiobook version, written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. They're available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. The links to those audiobooks are also in the description as well. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload, shall we? Well, I have a few subscriber submissions, and I also have a couple of other terrifying encounters. So let's start the upload with a subscriber submission. Hello, Mr. Jeffrey. My name is Redacted. I'm from a small town in South Carolina. I've been listening to your channel for a few days now and thought maybe you'd like to hear my encounter I had 7 years ago. I was 15 years old at the time and always been an outdoors type of man, and I've been handling guns since I was 10. One day my uncle called and asked if I wanted to go camping with him in some woods his buddy owned, and of course I said yes. We spent the day gathering wood, setting up camp, and by evening we went to hunt some squirrel for supper that night. While hunting, we did get a few squirrel, but we came upon a couple coyote carcasses, rotting near each other and pretty torn apart. My uncle thought it was a little strange, and so did I, because the way they were so mangled. And down here we have a few bear, and I haven't seen but a few bobcat down here in my life. We just shrugged it off, though, and headed back to camp and cooked our kill. After we ate, we decided to hit the hay. We had a big two-door tent that we shared that night, and we didn't have time to sleep before we heard the coyotes in the distance. It sounded just like they were fighting, but then we heard them start yelping, like they were being attacked. It made the hair on my arms stand up, and we stayed up listening till it stopped. My uncle just told me they were fighting and go back to sleep, but I could tell he was concerned. I debated adding this to the story, but I will anyway. After a couple of hours of sleeping, my uncle woke up yelling, and he jumped out of his side of the tent. I got out and asked what was wrong. He was covered in sweat and sat by the low fire, and when I sat next to him, he said he had a dream that a ghostly-looking woman tied up on a horseback was being escorted by men in occult robes, walking by our tent. And when she got next to us, she turned and looked dead into his soul with glowing blue eyes, and that's when he woke up. It wasn't long after that, still by the fire, we heard the coyotes again yelping and hollering. My uncle said something just not right in these woods tonight. We eventually did get a little rest, and that morning we decided to head back home. The next day, my uncle put a trail cam up near where our camp was, in a tree stand. Not expecting to see what he caught, the camera took a picture a couple nights after of a creature that I've never seen before in my life. I've been hunting for years. It was black as night, and it looked almost like a dang mutant wolf. It was just so unnatural. It had big pointed ears, and it stood high off the ground on all fours, and it had a long tail. The body had fairly thick fur, but the snout was short like a panther or something. It had its mouth open, full of sharp teeth. You could see the muscles on this thing, but the most unsettling thing was the glowing, fiery orange eyes this thing had. When I seen this picture, a serious chill went down my spine. A week later, I went hunting in those woods, but one night in the stand, I think I heard this creature. I was in my uncle's stand when all of a sudden I heard a loud scream like nothing I had ever heard before. I've heard bobcat, mountain lion once, and this was nothing like it. Then it started making sounds almost like a monkey would make. Almost. I can't really describe it. I think I may have seen it once, but I'm not 100% sure. I've told a few people about this, and only 2 believed me beside my uncle. My uncle hasn't shown many people the picture either. I'm not sure if he even still has it, as he doesn't really talk about it. I have a buddy who lives near me and swears he saw the same thing cross the road in front of him on the dirt road. I hope you enjoy this encounter, and sorry if it's a bit off all over the place, but I'd like to hear back from you if you enjoyed the story. Well, yeah, I'd really like to have you on sometime. I'm going to shoot you out an email. I'd like to talk about that picture. Maybe you can talk to your uncle and see if he has it still, because I'd like to see it. I'm sure everybody else would too on the channel. So if you get this, if you hear this before I send you an email me back, but I'll be sending you one. Today's second subscriber submission. Hey Jeff, my name is Jack. Feel free to use my name if you feel this encounter is worthy of your channel. I'm an avid outdoorsman who loves to hunt and fish by myself, not so much since I found out what's really out there in the woods. This particular encounter happened about 4 months ago. I was at a buddy's, we'll call him Mac, at his cabin. It's located in a campground in Ohio. He's been staying there year-round for the last 4 years. The cabin consists of an RV with 3 rooms built around it, with a double deck outside of the sunroom. Perhaps rules you can build, but you have to have an RV on the lot with the ability to hook up and pull out if you have to. We first became aware of the presence of Dogman about 3 years ago and started to investigate further. We've had multiple sightings of 7 different individuals as well as the Grassman, Bigfoot. On this particular night, I had driven 45 minutes down there and been quiet outside all evening. We were having a spirited debate about several things when I had enough. I decided to head back home, and it was getting late, 12:30 to be exact. I was walking by the monitor from one of the outside cameras when I heard the Dogman's half growl and half bark, and it stopped me in my tracks. We both stayed silent, listening. Then we heard a familiar creak of the steps coming up to the door. Then the doorknob jiggled ever so slightly. We stayed motionless and silent. All at once the floor under our feet rose up. One had gotten under the cabin part. Now we're starting to panic a little because they've never been this brazen. They've jumped onto the roof before and thrown things at the cabins, but this was a lot more serious. So I went to the kitchen to peek through the curtain and check the back. We heard a noise outside the band room window, which is the opposite door. So Mac went to investigate. We meet back in the living room, and he was sweating and whiter than usual. He said he got onto his knees and pulled open the blind in the sunroom, same side as the band room window, to see 2 large Dogmen standing there. He said he didn't look at him, but stepped backward into the shadows. For the next 3.5 hours, we were silent, me in the living room watching the door with my .357 Magnum cocked and ready for action, Mac in the sunroom watching the sliding doors, and onto the deck with a .45 cocked and ready. We could still hear them outside, and I felt the floor raise up once in a while, knowing one was still under there. Around 5 in the morning, I had to go home because I had to get my grandchildren on the bus, because my other half will be leaving for work, and it was my job to get the little ones on the bus and make sure the other 2 were on as well. So in a state of absolute terror, where fear turns into anger, he covered me. When I pulled open the curtains in the window in the living room and raised the window, we both yelled out, "Come on and get some, you sons of bitches. Come and get some, we're tired of you." Then everything went silent, so we waited a half an hour, went outside. I got to my truck and covered him as Mac walked around to the entrance under the cabin. The door was shut, and everything that was piled against it was put back in different places than they were, but put back nonetheless. Amazing, they had all that wherewithal to do that. So then I drove home, freaked out all the way, still terrified, to get the kids on the bus in time, and went to work. That's the scariest encounter I have to date. Thanks for everything you do. Well, I'm going to say the same thing. I want you on the channel to share that encounter and some of the other ones that you were talking about in the beginning. I'll send you out an email. If you hear this before I send you out that email, please email me before that. Today's third part of the upload. It started, I suppose, last winter, being in a practically dry area in Southern California. It was, to my great surprise, when a friend of mine and I discovered a sizable lake just over a small ridge on a well-traveled road in our area. We began to explore the area, aided by Google Earth, which revealed a large number of lakes in the same vicinity. The lakes, as I was to later discover, were part of the valley's flood control system and hold water for much of the year. During one of our explorations, we found something out of place. It was February, I believe, and after the rainy season, the grass had grown pretty tall on a ridge overlooking the first lake we found. On this ridge, we found a trail with very large footprints. These prints were approaching 2 feet in length, with a very long stride, longer than that of my friend, who was 6'6". We followed these prints for a good quarter of a mile before they disappeared into the chaparral. From then on, we dubbed the creature Lake Ape, and made many subsequent searches to no avail, besides the discovery of several more lakes. He decided to drive to a new side road alone one night. What made him do this, I don't know. The road is terrifying at night. He was nearing the first of a terraced hill when a figure crossed the road in front of him. He described it as tall, dark humanoid. It then climbed a 5 to 6 foot berm on the side of the road and disappeared in the direction of the hill. We returned to the area the next day and reenacted the scene. From this, he determined the creature must have been much taller than even he was, to have looked taller than that berm from the distance that he saw it at. I have to admit I didn't believe him at first and thought that he was just making it up. The following took place in the space of about 2 minutes. While looking up at the trees, I noticed something much closer to us, standing in the field on the other side of the berm. My thought process was actually quite comical. I first dismissed it as bush, then kept looking up at the trees. I glanced at it again, then thought it was a man, a very tall man. Then I looked at it a little longer and realized it was covered in brown hair, and rather than a Sasquatch-like creature, I would have expected it had a dog-like head, most comparable to a German Shepherd. I asked my friend, "Are you seeing this?" And he said, "You mean the figure over there?" There was a moment of silence in which the creature walked off to the left to the area where the berm was too high to see over and disappeared. I believe we both shouted, "Oh shit," and sped off. From then on, Lake Ape became Dogman. Both of our accounts of the creature matched up. We agreed it was 7 to 8 feet tall, was covered in brown fur, had a wide chest and muscular physique. Body more akin to a man than a Sasquatch is to be reported. Had a head canine-like, closely resembling a German Shepherd or another wolf-like dog, with large pointed ears. Today's fourth part of the upload. Anyone who has looked into the study of ghosts and hauntings knows of the Waverly Hills sanatorium, which is located on the southwest side of Louisville, Kentucky. The hospital opened in the 1920s as a treatment center for tuberculosis and continued operations until the 1960s. The treatments there were nothing more than a series of tortures performed in the name of medical science on helpless patients, more like victims, who had no say in the matter. An alarming number of those patients, over 6,000 people, would never leave the grounds alive after arriving. After sitting dormant for nearly 40 years, Tina Mattingly purchased the building, renovated it, and then opened it to the public as an ultimate ghost hunting experience. This is all well-documented public information. What's not well known is the story of 2 individuals who took a trip to the sanatorium back in 1993, almost 10 years before the property changed hands, and when it was very illegal to venture forth upon the hill to get a peek into the darkened remains of the infamous hospital. As illegal as may have been, many thrill-seekers looking for ghostly adventures traveled long distances to climb the hill and explore the abandoned building. The story began at the Fort Knox Military Reservation, some 30 miles south of Waverly Hills. In fact, traveling north on US 31W Waverly Hills Sanatorium is a straight shot from the famous Gold Vault, which is located on the base. A little further south is the town of Radcliffe, and it's here where a retired soldier decided to come forward and report his harrowing story. The retired soldier and his companion, who wished to remain anonymous for obvious reasons, had an experience there, the likes of which they'd never seen before or since. For all intents and purpose, we'll call them Bill and Mike, according to their story. The two were looking to blow off some steam, and they had heard of the local legend of the sanatorium. Ready for some excitement, Bill told Mike that he would drive, if he was serious about checking it out. Then they jumped into the car and headed north. Upon arriving at the base of the hill, they decided to park by a nearby apartment complex, which is located at the southwestern edge of the property. Bill says they made an equipment check and started their ascension up to the long paved trail that snaked its way around the hill. We walk being cautious because we knew if we got caught we'd be in big trouble, Bill states with a chuckle. We walked for a few minutes on this paved walkway, which was completely surrounded in brush and overgrown shrubs. There was a gated area some ways up the hill. We just walked around it. About 5 minutes up the hill, in the damn near pitch black, we saw movement ahead of us. Mike was terrified, and he froze up, still, like a mannequin. I have to admit, I was a little scared as well, because what we saw, we still can't fully explain. It was at this point during his tale his voice took a more serious tone. Admittedly, listening to him recant what he witnessed raised the hair on the back of my neck. We stood there for a second trying to figure out the logical explanation for what we were seeing. At first it was sort of hunched over, just sitting there like it was waiting for us. It looked like a large dog, but larger than a Great Dane. The thing I'll never forget were those fiery yellow eyes. They were ablaze in the night like the fires of hell. I grabbed Mike's arm to sort of snap him out of his trance and told him to back up slowly. The creature we saw that night, I can only tell you that I believe it was a werewolf. The reason I say this is because as we backed up, it stood up on its hind legs and took a step forward. No dog I know does that. At least, not the way this thing did. We moved back down the path slowly, with this thing following us. I believe if it had wanted to, it could have killed us right there, but for some reason, it let us leave unharmed. It watched us all the way back down the hill and then darted off into the thick wooded area surrounding the hill. We never told anyone else about this for 2 reasons. 1, we weren't supposed to be up there, and 2, who would believe a story like that? So we end the conversation. Bill asks me to respectfully leave out his name, as well as Mike's real name, out of the story because he feared some sort of retribution for his illegal escapade during his term of service in the United States Army. I thanked him for his service as well as the interview, and we both went our separate ways. So without a single shred of tangible evidence, and with a story that happened in a time before iPhone video, we have a horrifying tale of someone who I personally believe is very credible. The seriousness in Bill's voice and the look on his face when he described the creature that he and Mike had witnessed there at the Waverly Hills Sanatorium spoke volumes. I want to put emphasis on his description of the eyes of that creature. They were ablaze in the night like the fires of hell. I'm convinced that Bill fully believes he saw 100% a werewolf. Could this have been an actual werewolf? If so, then has anyone else reported seeing such a creature in the southern Louisville area? Is it possible that this was some sort of apparition, a manifestation itself Bill and Mike's worst fears? The area surrounding the hospital is known to have strange effects on unwary visitors. Ghosts, disembodied voices have presented themselves to thousands of people who have made their trek to Waverly Hills. it's entirely feasible to believe other types of supernatural creatures could be possibly lurking those woods around that hospital. So, yeah, first of all, before everyone's like, that's a dog man, not a werewolf. I'm just kidding, guys. But, the guy's older. He probably never heard of Dogman, so he just called it, as he saw it, werewolf. But yeah, I really think that Dogman, werewolf, Sasquatch are attracted to places like that. I mean, you gotta think there's just death. There's just, an energy of sorts is there. And where do these creatures love to hang out at night? Mainly cemeteries in the woods. Well, you've got a sanatorium where almost 6,000 people died. I'm sure there's cemeteries around there, or I'm sure there's some dead bodies buried in those grounds. So why not? Why not just hang out there? I mean, prime location. If you hear this and you decide to go over there, though, be careful, all right? These things are nothing to play with. Don't go empty-handed thinking, I'll go and just... If anybody ever goes on a expedition, do me a favor, all right? Plan it ahead. Have a friend with you. Don't go by yourself. I would bring 2 friends, so there's 3 of you. Make sure people know where you're going. Preferably people you trust to call the police or the proper people if you don't come back. Always bring protection. Knives, machetes, pistol, rifle if possible. You could always bring the shockwave, the Mossberg shockwave. It's a little 12 gauge shotgun. Fits right in a backpack. Bear spray, walking sticks, just stuff to keep yourself safe. Walkie-talkie, cell phone, lights, flashlights. But yeah, I mean, be prepared. Just because the Boy Scouts were a thing of the past, and when we were young, or Girl Scouts if you're a woman, take their freaking motto. There's a reason for it, man. Be freaking prepared. Today's final part of the upload, Saline County, Illinois. Me and my friend Ryan and his girlfriend were coming home from work in Marion. She lives in Redacted, so we took her home. She was out in the middle of bumfuck Egypt. When we got out of the truck to stretch out, I felt like I was being watched by something in the woods. The woods were so thick where we were that you couldn't see anything besides open fields before we got to her house. Her dog was going rabid, barking like crazy. I could feel that we were not alone out there. By the time we pulled out of her driveway, we drove about 10 minutes. Ryan was driving, I was looking out the window. And there's a gate with an open field. Behind the gate was a werewolf-looking creature with glowing yellow eyes. As I stared at it, I tranced for about 4 to 5 seconds. I yelled out, "What the hell is that?" Ryan said he thought he had seen something too, so we stopped the truck for a second and looked back. This werewolf creature jumped over a fence and started running toward the truck. Ryan hits the gas. The creature was close behind, but luckily it was not fast enough. After a few minutes, we got back into town. Ryan told me that he had seen the creature run across the road earlier in the morning a few days before that, but didn't think anyone would believe him. Well, I believe there are werewolves/dogmen after that, and Bigfoots, but the only thing I can say is what me and him saw that night. It scared the shit out of me and him. A brief description of what we saw. Well, I'm 6 foot, and I'd have to say this thing was 6.5 to 7 feet. It had yellow, glowing, trancing eyes, black and gray hair, long snout, just like a dog, but had long fangs. It stood up like a man, but was much larger. Missing cattle, mutilated deer, dogs, and other animals have been found in that area. I've also heard reports of cattle missing and deer found torn to pieces. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Hopefully I can get those 2 subs on here and share their experiences with us. That'll be cool. Yeah, so just be safe out there, guys. And, you know, I know it sounds like a fun time for some, but if you're gonna do it smart. Alright, please. Don't go half-cocked, not thinking. Always really be prepared, and I mean, you want to come home after going out in the woods, you know? You don't want to have that last trip be your last trip, man. So, alright, with that, I'm going to bid you all farewell, and see ya!